In the northern reaches of the Sahara, beyond the maps and the memory of men, there lies a place that does not belong to the world of ours. It's called Andorra, the desert that breathes. Those who have seen it speak of a silence so complete that even their thoughts seem to echo. The air there moves in slow waves, as if the sand itself were alive, inhaling, exhaling, keeping time with something older than the sun. For centuries, the nomadic tribes have avoided Andorra. They say it is not cursed nor sacred, but patient. It waits. Their elders tell stories around the fire of travelers who crossed the line of dunes and never changed again. Their hair stayed black, their skin smooth, their eyes fixed as though the light inside them had stopped burning. No one dies there, they say, but nothing grows either. In 1948, a French explorer named Marcel Duval entered Andorra. He was not a man of superstition. He carried a compass, a watch, a notebook filled with coordinates. He had read whispers of a region where compasses spun and where day refused to end. He wanted to prove it false, to show that myths are only shadows of misunderstanding. On the third day of travel, the wind stopped. The sand fell silent. The sun stood at the same height it had that morning. His guide crossed himself and begged to turn back. But Duval insisted. He wrote that the heat felt different, not scorching but steady, like standing in the breath of a sleeping giant. At noon, his watch froze. The second hand trembled and would not move again. He tapped the glass, nothing, and yet his pulse continued slow and calm. He noticed the faces of his companions growing strange. Their skin took on a pale sheen like salt after the tide. Their eyes glimmered faintly in the light. But there was no sweat, no exhaustion, no hunger. They walked for what they believed were hours, but the sun refused to shift. The dunes ahead were always the same distance away, as though the horizon were fixed in place. At night, when they rested, the air felt alive, as if something beneath them was breathing through the sand. Duval described hearing a low hum, like a deep heart beating under the earth. On the seventh day, one of his men began to scream, not from pain, but from confusion. He said the stars were gone. When Duval looked up, he saw nothing but blackness, not the dark of night, but the absence of the sky itself. The man collapsed, his body trembling, then went still. There was no heartbeat, yet his eyes remained open. The next morning, his face looked untouched. No stiffness, no decay, only stillness. Duval wrote that his sense of time began to dissolve. He felt weightless, as though walking underwater. His voice carried strangely. Echoes came back seconds late. He noticed that his shadow no longer followed his steps. It drifted a moment behind, like a memory trying to keep up. When he finally turned back, he thought he had been gone 3 days. But when he reached the first trading post, the men there fell silent. He was the only survivor. The date was 27 days later. His beard had not grown. His clothes were clean. His eyes were hollow. He handed them his notebook and walked into the desert again before sunrise. He was never found. The notebook contained drawings of patterns carved into the dunes, spirals, repeating lines that seemed to converge on a single point. Some believed they were hallucinations caused by dehydration. Others noticed that the same patterns appeared later on satellite scans of magnetic anomalies deep beneath the Sahara. In the years that followed, sightings of Duval were reported along the old caravan routes. Always the same man, always the same face. Never older, the nomads began to say that Andorra does not steal lives, it steals years. That it feeds on the weight of time itself, consuming every passing second until nothing moves but the breath of the earth. To step inside it is to enter the pause between heartbeats, the space where existence forgets itself, and yet for some, the idea became an obsession. They spoke of Andorra not as a curse but as salvation, a place untouched by decay, where skin never withers and youth never fades. They imagined standing there, skin smooth, lungs full, heart calm, suspended forever in that perfect stillness. No past, no future, only the eternal moment of now, the old ones warn against such dreams. They say that everything in the world depends on motion, rivers flowing, stars dying, seasons turning. To stop is to break the rhythm of life itself. But Ndora does not care for warnings. It waits beneath the sun, patient and unchanging, breathing in silence. And somewhere, perhaps, Marcel Duval is still walking. Not older, not younger. Just the same man, beneath the same sun that never sets, in a desert that never stops breathing. For more than half a century after Marcel Duval vanished into the dunes, Ndora was left alone. Maps ignored it, governments denied it, and only the desert itself remembered. But silence never lasts. Curiosity always returns to the places that try hardest to stay forgotten. In 2003, a small scientific team from the University of Cairo assembled to revisit Duval's coordinates. They were led by Dr. Amina Rashid, a physicist who believed the legend of Ndora hid something measurable, not a curse, not a myth, but an anomaly. She was fascinated by one question: what if time was not constant but elastic? She argued that regions of extreme magnetism could bend the local flow of time, slowing biological decay. Her colleagues laughed at her theory, but when the satellite scans came back blank, showing a hole in the magnetic field exactly where Ndora was said to lie, she decided to see for herself. The team consisted of 6 researchers and 2 guides. They traveled by jeep across the dunes for 3 days. At first, the sand shifted normally under the wheels, the compasses steady. But as they drew closer to the coordinates, every instrument began to stutter. The temperature sensors looped between 40 degrees and absolute zero. The digital clocks reset themselves every hour. And then the pulse appeared. It began as a faint tremor under the tires. Rhythmic, steady, too slow to be seismic. One beat every 12 seconds, vibrating through the sand. At first, they thought it was machinery buried beneath the dunes. But the signal grew stronger the farther they went, as though they were driving into the chest of something vast and alive. When they set up camp at dusk, the air felt heavy, dense enough to press against the skin. Breathing became easier but slower, as if the lungs were matching the rhythm of the pulse. Dr. Rashid wrote in her journal that her heartbeat had unconsciously synchronized with it. She described the feeling as calm, almost divine, like existing in perfect harmony with the earth itself. The next morning, one of the team members, an engineer named Khalil, noticed something wrong with his hands. The lines on his palms had faded. The skin was smoother, paler, cool to the touch. He joked that the desert had given him new skin. But when they examined him under a microscope, they found something impossible. The skin cells showed no signs of mitosis. They had stopped dividing, and yet they were still alive. Over the following days, the same effect spread through the group. Wrinkles softened, freckles disappeared. The texture of their faces grew flawless, almost reflective, like porcelain in sunlight. Their metabolism slowed dramatically. Hunger and thirst vanished. One man slept for 30 minutes and woke claiming he had dreamed for years. At first, the team celebrated. They believed they had discovered the key to longevity, a natural suspension field created by minerals in the sand. Samples were collected and sealed to be studied back in Cairo, but every time they attempted to record their findings, the footage distorted. Voices echoed out of sync. The pulse grew louder, resonating through metal and bone alike. It felt as if the desert itself was listening. On the 5th day, Khalil collapsed. His breathing had become shallow and rhythmic, identical to the pulse beneath the ground. They monitored him, heart rate stable, temperature constant, but his pupils no longer reacted to light. He was awake, staring into nothing. His lips moved, forming words no one could understand. Dr. Rashid leaned closer, and for a moment, the sound resembled a whisper. She thought he said, "The sand remembers." That night, the pulse changed. The rhythm quickened, the air shimmered faintly, and the dunes appeared to move, shifting as though stirred from below. Somewhere in the distance, a low hum rose and fell, the sound of stone grinding against stone. The team packed their equipment in panic, but when they started their vehicles, none would start. The batteries were full, the circuits intact, but there was no spark. Electricity itself refused to flow. The next transmission received from the team lasted 11 minutes. It began with wind, then static, and finally a voice repeating coordinates. At minute 10, a deep rumble filled the frequency. A male voice said, "It's breathing," and the line went dead. When rescue units arrived weeks later, they found the camp untouched. Tents standing, notebooks open, food still fresh. No footprints led away. Only a perfect circle of smooth glass in the sand, as if lightning had struck from beneath the surface. Inside that circle, time itself seemed wrong. Rescuers reported that their watches slowed while standing near it. The second hand resisted motion, dragging as though through thick liquid. The samples taken from the site were later analyzed by independent researchers. They found traces of an unknown compound, a crystalline dust capable of refracting ultraviolet radiation in reverse. When tested on organic tissue, it caused cellular aging to halt completely for several hours. The phenomenon could not be replicated. The samples eventually disintegrated into ordinary sand, leaving no residue. Dr. Rashid's journal was recovered, half buried near the glass circle. The final entry read, "Time is not moving here. It's listening, waiting for us to leave." Her handwriting stopped mid-sentence, as if her hand had frozen. The official report called the incident an electromagnetic illusion. But one of the rescuers, interviewed anonymously years later, said something different. He claimed that when he touched the sand near the circle, it was cold, colder than stone at night. And for a moment, he felt his pulse vanish, replaced by another rhythm, deep and patient, beating far below. He said it felt like standing on the heart of the earth. No one returned to Andorra after that. The coordinates were erased from public maps, the files sealed under government classification. But strange things began to happen across northern Africa. Villagers reported seeing people walking under the midday sun, whose shadows lagged behind them. Some claimed that when they tried to speak to these wanderers, their voices arrived seconds late. And every so often, the desert glows faintly at night, a slow, steady pulse of light beneath the dunes. Scientists call it heat shimmer. The nomads know better. They say it is the heartbeat of time itself, still breathing under the sand, waiting for those who once heard it to return. The wind over Andorra never howls. It moves like breath, slow and steady, as if it belongs to something asleep. Those who speak of it now do so in whispers, afraid the desert might be listening still. The reports, the theories, the photographs, they all end the same way, with silence. But silence has a shape here, and it is vast. Long before satellites and explorers, the Tuareg told stories of an ancient rhythm beneath the Sahara. They believed the world itself was alive, that every grain of sand carried memory, the memory of heat, of footsteps, of passing time. They said Andorra was not a place but a moment, the instant when the planet takes a breath. When the earth inhales, everything pauses. When it exhales, time begins again. Those who walk too far into that breath never find their way back. For the tribes, it was not a curse. It was respect. They called it the kneeling of time. Because in that stillness, even the universe bows its head. Modern scientists dismissed such myths, but the evidence left behind by the Cairo expedition refused to vanish. Fragments of glass sand that never cooled, isotopes that aged in reverse, and the recorded heartbeat of something deep under the surface, too regular to be natural. When analyzed, the sound contained harmonic patterns identical to the rhythm of a human heart. But it was slower, older, as if it had been beating since the beginning. Dr. Amina Rashid's journal survived long enough to reach the archives of the Ministry of Antiquities. Hidden inside a sealed envelope was a small piece of fabric, smooth and cool to the touch. Under the microscope, the threads shimmered faintly, alive with microscopic motion. It was not cloth. It was skin, human but ageless, its cells locked in a perpetual state of suspension. They neither divided nor decayed. They simply existed. The scientists argued endlessly. Was it a mineral reaction or something beyond comprehension? But one truth became clear. Aging, decay, and the passage of time were not constants. They could be paused if one stood in the right place, under the right breath of the earth. People began to dream of it. They called it the Sanctuary of Youth, a place untouched by death. There were whispers of wealthy men who sent private expeditions searching for Ndora, hoping to capture eternity in a jar of sand. None returned. Those who tried came back with hair unchanged and faces blank, as though part of them had been erased. Their voices were slow, their movements precise, their eyes distant, not broken but detached, like clocks running in a different room. One of them, a cartographer named Elias Verne, spoke only once before disappearing again. He said, "When you are inside Ndora, time doesn't stop. It kneels." When asked what that meant, he smiled and whispered, "You can feel it breathing through you." He died the next day. Or perhaps he didn't. The report was inconclusive. No autopsy was ever made public. Years later, satellite imagery over the Sahara began to reveal something impossible. A faint, circular depression more than 80 kilometers wide, appearing and vanishing every few months. Inside that circle, temperatures dropped, winds calmed, and electromagnetic waves flattened to zero. It was as if a great pulse beneath the desert was slowing the heartbeat of the planet itself. The phenomenon lasted minutes at a time, but those minutes defied measurement. Clocks in nearby stations lost sync. Cameras froze mid-recording. Birds circled but never entered. Some called it the event horizon of Earth. Others called it a wound. But for those who believed in Ndora, it was the desert breathing again, the earth taking another long, patient inhale. No one knows what lies beneath. Seismic readings show an immense cavern system far below the dunes, filled with crystallized minerals that resonate when struck by low-frequency sound. It is said that the vibration of those crystals can interfere with atomic decay, halting the microscopic clockwork that governs life and death. Perhaps the sand above acts as a mirror, reflecting the pulse of the core back toward the surface. Perhaps that reflection creates the field where time kneels. If that is true, then the secret of Ndora is not immortality, it is equilibrium. Life in perfect stillness, caught between motion and rest, between a single breath in and a single breath out. The body forgets to age because it forgets to move. The mind forgets to count because it forgets the future. In that place, there is no tomorrow to fear and no past to mourn. There is only the present, endless and vast. Imagine standing there under that motionless sky, the air cool against your skin, your pulse blending with the deep rhythm beneath your feet, your reflection on the grains of glass sand, unchanged, unbroken. No hunger, no decay, only balance. You could stay there forever, untouched by time, bathed in silence, part of the breathing world. A single heartbeat stretched across eternity, but the old tribes warn that what does not move eventually fades. A flame that never flickers loses its light. They say those who seek the stillness of Ndora are not seeking life, but forgetting it. Because to live is to burn, to change, to age. And yet, even knowing this, people still dream of finding the desert. The idea of escaping time is too beautiful to resist. They imagine the smoothness of ageless skin, the perfection of a moment that never breaks. They imagine peace, the kind that doesn't end. Perhaps that is why Ndora endures. Because the desire to escape the clock is older than civilization itself. The latest reports from orbit show that the sands have shifted again. The circle is gone. Only silence remains. But at night, on certain frequencies, radio operators still detect a low rhythmic pulse coming from somewhere deep beneath the Sahara. 12 beats apart, steady and calm. It might be machinery. It might be the wind. Or it might be the earth itself, breathing slowly, waiting for the next traveler who dares to listen. And when they do, time will kneel again, just long enough to let another soul step outside of it and forget what it means to grow old.